Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm so happy to have you crafting with me today. In today's video, I am going to be finishing off one last spooky project. I know we are now well and truly into November, but there was one thing I just really needed to finish off this year, and while I was still in the spooky spirit, I decided to just take an extra week and finish off this project. Now, this is my 2024 Drawlloween journal. Now, Drawlloween happens every year, and each year the prompts are kind of similar, but this journal took me such a long time to put together, as in obviously within the 30 days, but it was epic. I had many hours, days, weeks weeks even, and I really enjoyed myself. I spent a lot of time working on each prompt in sort of a way that satisfied my interpretation of the prompt, but then also I did sort of go to the effort of trying to keep everything a little bit cohesive so it all sort of feels like it belongs in the same journal. This is a no-sew accordion style journal, which is a bit of a flavor of the month because at the moment I am also simultaneously working on no-sew November, so keep your eye out for the little shorts that I'll be posting each day for the month of November 2025. But this is a no-sew accordion style journal that I constructed out of book pages and then went through, and each panel or pane or fascia within the no-sew journal houses one of the prompts for the month of October. So I really enjoyed myself working in this, and the one thing that I didn't get finished and that has been living in my head rent-free that I am still yet to do is putting a cover on this journal. Now, I don't know if you're the same whenever you finish off a big project. Sometimes you just make it over the finish line and you run out of steam right at the end there, and you just need to take a little break, walk away. And I walked all the way away. It's been a year now or over a year since I finished this journal. And as you can see, I managed to get the front and back sort of outer covers covered in this really pretty embossed kind of vinyl style fabric. I did thrift it, just enough sort of, it was a decent sized piece, and this journal sort of sits not quite half an A4 sheet, but not a full A4 sheet. So you can sort of see as I've got it on my board there how big it is. And I really wanted to finish the cover. Like, let's just get it done. Let's put in the time, get it finished so that it can go on the shelf with all the other journals and out of my to-do pile. So what I want to do is, seeing as it already has those embossed covers, panels, I want to sort of add kind of like a wrap cover with a little closure, and kind of a bit like, I sort of in my head imagine it to be something a little bit like a taco, as in something that sort of slides on and off, but not, let's make it a soft shell taco, not a hard shell taco, so that, it sort of wraps around it like a jacket for the outside. And it will have like a little closure in the form of, I'm thinking like a button and some elastic. I sort of envisage it having some embroidery, and of course we are going to be keeping the color palette on theme with the rest of the journal, as well as on theme in terms of subject matter by making it nice and spooky. So I think a spider web is the way to go. So as you can see here, I've just got some brown paper, but of course use scrap paper. I used some brown paper just for ease of filming and making sure that you could see clearly what I was doing here. But just a piece of brown paper, and you want it sort of slightly smaller than the outside of your journal cover, but you want it long enough that it's going to wrap like, 3/4 of the way all the way around it from the front, enough depth on the thickness of the signature, and then enough on the back. So of course this can be any shape, of course this can be any size depending on the size of your journal, and just work with something that suits you. And if you don't want to do a spider web, do anything else. Take this idea, refashion it into something that suits whatever journal you're working on. This has been the plan for the cover of this journal for a really long time, and obviously over a year. And I just really wanted to get it out of my head, into my hands, and onto the cover of my journal. So we're going to attempt a spider web today. It's kind of a bit fussy. But didn't actually take too much time. I did have a night in between, but that was for drying time. So we'll get to that in a minute and you'll see what I mean. But in the meantime, I've taken my piece of vinyl and pinned our little spider web pattern on it. You saw how quick and easy it was to whip that up. We're just talking about some straight lines and some sort of flattened semicircles to create the outer shape of the spider web. I've pinned that down. Now this vinyl does have kind of like a fuzzy, fleecy kind of backing on it. Actually turned out to be perfect for this project because I did end up sewing onto it a lot and really did utilize the back of that vinyl as sort of like a structural component in putting the cover together. Now, obviously not every piece of fabric that you have is going to have that, but bear in mind that maybe it could be a fabric that's a little bit thicker, maybe some fleece would work as well, just something where, you can sort of stitch into the back of it. Or not, as we go through the project today, I'll sort of give you some tips and tricks along the way for if you're using a material that's a little bit different to this. So hang with me. But for now, what we're doing is I've actually transferred the image from the paper just lightly with pencil onto the back of the material. And I'm doing a really long back stitch here. So just a simple back stitch, but I'm making my back part of the back stitch very short, but as we move the needle forward, I'm actually taking it almost to the width of my needle, and that's giving me some really long stitches on the front. And basically what we're trying to do here is some very simple embroidery on the front. Now obviously the front cover is like this vinyl-y sort of thing, so we're not going to be able to do too much stitching in terms of catching the fabric at the front, but we are able to do some stitching. So that's how I'm going to be decorating this today. You obviously can then just paint on it, get some fabric paint going, get some regular acrylic paint, some Posca pens, acrylic markers, something that you can stick on. You could decoupage over this pretty easily with some Mod Podge, and I think all of those options would work. So again, take some of these ideas and apply it to your own project. Thicker fabric, thinner fabric, fabric that's been stiffened, I think all of these options would work for this. If you are following along and maybe doing something like what I'm doing here, a spider web, what I'm going to do is basically start weaving my web the same way that a regular old spider would, and that is by just working my way around. The one thing I have been doing here though is doing it in kind of a back stitch manner, so starting on one side and then pulling my stitch over back in on itself and working my way around every second little V of two of the large long sort of spider web arms, I guess. And then as we sort of get back to the beginning, I've sort of taken it out a little bit and then done every alternative one. So, if you've done like 1, 3, 5, 7, the next time you go around, you're going to do 2, 4, 6, 8, if that makes sense. So just watch me here as I sort of like slowly and gently just get these stitches going all the way around. It did take a bit of a while to do this, but once I actually got to where the stitches were going to be quite long as I was working my way around, I then just, instead of continuing in the round, I worked up each arm, and then then when I came to the next arm, just put my stitches alternatively like in the gap of the ones I just previously stitched, and that was much quicker. And when I got to the really, really long areas towards the very edge of the piece of vinyl there, I did actually do like a back stitch and separated them out just so that the stitches that were hanging there weren't too long. So you can see there what I mean. Some of them on the outer edges there are actually 2 stitches, not one really super long one. And you can see there where I've kind of got alternative, like where I've got a little gap, that was where I put the next stitch. If you've got any questions about that, I'll try and explain it in the comments if you need more guidance there, but hopefully the images sort of speak for themselves. Now, this was a little patch I got on clearance from Spotlight. Top tip, don't buy any of these type of things when they first come out, unless it's something you desperately want, because they're always really expensive. And then by the time the season's almost over, they start to discount everything really, really heavily, and it's great. It's a great way to pick up nice little extra bits of ephemera that aren't paper. I love to add, by now you should know, I love to add mixed media to my journals, especially the covers. So this is a really economical way of picking up some extra adornments for your journal. I've picked out here also, as you just saw, some buttons to act as the closure clasp for the journal, and got those just setting aside just so I know sort of size wise, and getting a position of everything on that vinyl, just laying out the real estate, making sure that I like where everything is sitting. And then using a back stitch in black thread this time to sew down our little bat patch. I did check, and he does glow in the dark, but unfortunately I wasn't able to get any actual clips of it, because it did glow, but not enough to actually pick up on camera. So I could see it with my eyes, but not with my camera, unfortunately. So I was like, how can I make this glow brighter? I didn't have any of like incandescent light bulbs in the house to make, like, to sort of inject the heat into it, which, you know, you need to make them brighter, but it does glow. So, you know, that'll be just for me. Like, I'll know, but nobody else, whoever looks at the journal, will know, except you all now. So I'm adding the, sorry, I digress. I'm adding the little buttons here, and one of them does actually look a little bit like a spider's web, which was such a great find. Isn't it great when you buy like random bottles of buttons and they have just the most random things in them? It's so fabulous. And I decided to do kind of a bit of a layered button effect here. I couldn't decide on one big button that I liked. So the top one is kind of a shank button, and as you can see, sorry, I've had this all the way up to under my nose while I was stitching that on, because it was kind of fussy to stitch the shank button over just the regular button, but it works. And because the shank button was so similar to the color of the vinyl, having that layered button kind of breaks it up a little bit and makes it stand out a little bit more. Love that. And the other thing I love about this project that I'm kind of obsessed with is this trim. This is also something I picked up on clearance last year from Spotlight. It sold so quickly once it went on sale, and I'd ordered like 4 rolls and they were only able to fulfill 3 of those rolls. So I like to use my supplies. I don't like to sort of stash them, but I have sort of kept a bit of this aside just for this project, because I knew I sort of wanted to incorporate it somehow. It sort of has like a really delicate, almost Victorian kind of look to it, which fits actually with some of my journal pages. I did try and have sort of like an old world vibe going on in this journal. So I definitely wanted to add some of that. The only thing is, because I didn't think to stitch it on before gluing down these vinyl panels, I was like, oh no, how am I going to get this on here? So I did pull out my trusty PVA. It's such a beauty, the Boils. You've seen me use it here before. And this was a little bit messy and very, very wet. So if that's not something you're into, if you prefer not to get too sloppy with your materials, just divert your gaze. But I did just get a paintbrush, like just one that I normally use for this, or with my Mod Podge, and I put it down with some glue and then realized it was not even remotely sticking. So I really went to town with the PVA, saturated it, and then just kind of got it in place and then just left it, like put it to the side and let it dry overnight. And that's what I'm saying about like having to sort of do half of this project one day and then coming back to it in the morning. And this project actually really definitely ended up being give Jess a crumb and she will eat the entire sourdough loaf. Because the more I sort of potted with it, the more I just thought, what else can I, like, oh, maybe I can add this, maybe I can add that. And, these days I sort of am like, the way I'm creating is just, if it feels like it needs something else, I take the time to do it. 5 minutes, an hour, it doesn't matter. I have been trying to elevate my craft that way by just saying, well, I know it's going to take an extra 20 minutes to sew some beads, but I'm going to do it because that's going to make the project just that little bit more fancy and just a little bit more put together. Of course, these are all optional things. You don't need to do that. But I did just go through and sporadically stitch on some little clear they were a combination actually, because I had just a little vial of random clear beads. So some of them are glass and some of them are plastic, and I've just sort of dotted them every so often on the little joins of our spider web. Now we're sort of up to the stage where we're wanting to put a backing on it. Some of the steps I ended up doing the next day, really, I probably could have done before putting the backing on. So just bear that in mind. I did sew the backing on the first day, probably should have done it the second day. This is a very loose weave, kind of weird fabric piece that, again, I picked up from the op shop. It is a kind of like, I assume it's been like a napkin or, like a doily style thing where you pop it down on the table like a dust catcher for underneath like a vase or something like that. That was the vibe it gave me. And so I decided to use up a lot of it for this project as the backing, and also to create just a little number profile for this journal to just remind me on the outside which year this is from. So obviously this is from 2024, so made a little 24 sign. I didn't use fabric paint for that, just some regular old acrylic. This isn't going to get any movement or any use so far as like getting washed or anything like that, so just some regular paint is fine here. And used a little teeny tiny brush and my giant thrifted number stencil to make that little number profile, and then that was another thing I popped aside to dry. Then I sort of started this process, and you can sort of see here I'm trying to sort of move my hands around to get comfortable with trying to figure out how to actually sew this, because it sort of felt a little bit awkward while I was trying to sew it. It is just a running stitch here, and I'm kind of catching the edges of the fuzzy side of the vinyl as I'm stitching it around. And if you were using a backing that was the same color as your front, then you can just stitch around the edge and not worry about trying to get it like in the groove or anything like that. Like just stitch around it, that would be fine. And if I was using a dark brown fabric for the backing, that's exactly what I would do, just because it would be quicker and a little bit easier. So I stitched that on, and as you can see, we are in the day 2 phase of this little cover project, and I have let everything dry overnight and everything's ready to go. So I actually got through the next couple of little jobs reasonably quickly, and that's just to trim off the backing here. I did leave just the tiniest gap just to make sure I didn't nick any of the stitches that might have come through a little bit longer. I really did not worry about the stitching, any of the stitching in this project being too tidy, being too uniform. I just went for it and I encourage you to do the same. Like, don't worry about if your stitches aren't perfect or whatever, just get it done. Get it done and it will look great. And, especially with something like a Drawlloween or Halloween or any sort of spooky project, sometimes things looking a little bit off kilter actually adds to that kind of spooky fun effect. So I just went through and cleaned everything up. Our number was dry, so again this sort of falls into the sourdough situation we were talking about before, and I sort of thought, maybe I could add just a little border to this number rather than just cutting it out and straight away sticking it on. So I grabbed my black thread out again and just did a little back stitched border around it after having ruled some lines. When I cut this out, I did sort of cut it just slightly inside the ruled line, so I didn't have to worry about rubbing that out. That's a kind of top tip. If you're nifty with scissors, make your lines just a smidgen bigger than they have to be, and then just cut on the inside of them, and then you're not dealing with pencil lines or, what are they? It's called like dress chalk and stuff like that. Just makes things just that little bit easier. So just stitching around in a back stitch in the around the perimeter of this 24, and you can see it didn't really go all the way through that paint, so it was fine. And then going in with my trusty Bear double-sided tape. I love this product. It's so good. You've seen me use it here many times. And we're basically creating with this tape a giant sticker. And this will hold fabric, many materials. So I've used it on plastic, lots of things. So it's a really good one to have in your stash or something similar. Making a sticker and getting it all face down, and then obviously before we remove the backing, then just trimming off the excess, removing the little backing bits of, what do you call that? The bits of the back of the tape. You know what I'm doing. And then getting that stuck down in position on the front cover, and that's just going to connotate which journal and which year this is from. So in the future, when I've lost my marbles, I'll know which one is which. Because I've only done 2 at this stage, but Drawlloween is one of my favorite monthly challenges to participate in. So, and it is the one time of year where I go really wild with spooky, journaling and paper crafting. So I plan to do more in the future. Who knows? But I did think having the year on the outside is kind of a fun little detail. So now I'm just going in, and this is one of those things where I really probably could have done this before adding the backing. Thankfully, though, as you can see, I had left the opening on one side open just to be able to add some sewing and other things for it. So again, another top tip, if you're not really done with something, just leave a gap so that you're not having to unpick anything and you're not making life just that little bit harder for yourself. This is just some regular hat elastic here. It's just a small one. And I always have this like panic that if I sew this, even though it has like obviously the stitching around the outside of it, that it's going to be something that's just going to slide straight out or spring back. Oh my gosh, the horror. So this time, let me know down in the comments actually if you have a better way of doing what I'm about to do here, because I would love to know if there's like a quicker, easier, more efficient or better, most effective way to add this type of elastic to in this fashion to your journal. I grabbed some more scraps, and then basically what I'm doing is creating 2 little tabs into which I want to basically fuse the 2 ends of the elastic, and I'm using this fusion tape here, which is just that great stuff. I've been using it for years for all different things. It's so good and it's so cheap, and you can actually find it secondhand if you are lucky. And I've just laid out enough of that on each piece of this scrap fabric to cover a decent length at the tip of each end of this elastic. And then I'm going to take that out and I just put it under a really hot iron, and that just gives me 2 little tabbies which I can now sort of hopefully sew on the inside, again, look, I had to turn it inside out, guys, because I really should have done this before sewing the backing on. But we're making it work. It's not ideal, but we're making it work. And then the way that I sort of added the tabs is to have them not facing straight ahead, if that makes sense. I just turned them on an angle. So again, hopefully a little bit more resistance in making sure that they stay snug and don't spring back one lonely night when I'm like taking my journal out and then all of a sudden the elastic just pulls out. Oh my gosh, no, I can't deal. So I did that on either side, as you can see, having the tails facing outwards on both sides, and then I did sew over them inside that little patch there, and then I sewed the legs all the way down basically to where I added the eyelet. And sorry, did I mention that? I did add the eyelet there, as you can see. And then obviously I didn't put the eyelet through the backing, only the front, so that way the tails can fit through that neatly. They're not going to rip any further holes in your fabric. And it just sort of looks nice. Getting just that little eyelet kit has been something I've only done recently. And I've used it a bunch of times already. So that was like a really, just a simple one to have, but very, very effective and proving very useful. So now that we've got all of our details in terms of a working closure attached to our spiderweb soft taco shell, I am stitching up the end here just with the same sort of running stitch. And I should mention too that the lighter thread that I used for the spiderweb embroidery at the front, obviously you can use any thread that you like. You could use yarn, you could use wool, you could use embroidery floss, cotton. I used a cotton, but it is an upholstery, a cotton, so it's just that little bit thicker. So once I doubled it over, I was able to get some really strong lines while stitching it down. So that's something to think about too, like depending on what shape you were using. Maybe you were just wanting to stitch, oh my goodness, like a smiley face or some little stars or just something else that's a bit simple. You could go in with like a thicker thread or some yarn, or have a play, have a think, and have a look at what you've got in your stash and see what you can make use of. It doesn't have to be any specific material is the point I'm getting to here. And another slice of sourdough, here we go. I decided to add yet another detail, which was just to go in with my Posca. This is real time. I was concentrating so hard and being so careful and slow. Like just so deliberate with working on the edge here, just adding a freehand line to the border of each of the cover fascias as well as our taco edges as well, just to sort of make them pop. I had it sort of sitting on top and it did look okay without it, but I just thought it needed just that one little bit of extra something just to separate all the colors and make them sort of stand out just that little bit more. I say colors, I mean the fact that the two materials are the same. So they did sort of start to blend into each other just that little bit. So putting a little border on it, great idea. And once we did that, oh my gosh, we're done. We've eaten the entire loaf. Look at us go. This was such a satisfying project to have finished. I have been waiting for the day where I had time just to finish this off, and I'm so glad I could use it as a way to round out a really fun season of spooky journaling this year. And finishing this off, it, as I say, has been sitting in my to-do pile unfinished since October last year, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. The one thing that ended up being just a little bit off was the elastic band that I added. The hat elastic was just a smidgen too long, so it did sit snugly, but not super tight. And obviously with my journal pages there, they do sort of stick out a little bit. So anything too tight, I was sort of conscious of things being too tight because I was worried it would like kind of cut into that brittle paper on the sides. But I was able to just wrap the elastic around the button 2 times, and then that was enough to sort of hold it in place and keep it snug but not have it be too tight. But every element of this little project turned out to be so fun. I am so happy to have stashed away patches and things and that lace from Spotlight. It's always a good idea to just check on clearance some bits and pieces after any sort of seasonal decorating, because you might find some little gems that you can add in. It's not always easy to find these things thrifting, is it? But what a great way to use up some bits and pieces from our stash as well. I hope you've enjoyed this project, everyone. That's going to wrap things up for today, but I look forward to seeing you next week. We will resume regular journaling and we will be heading back into Fisherman's Basket. In the meantime, I want to wish you a very happy crafting and thank you so very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.